Alright, today's lesson is on plotting points with negative numbers on a coordinate plane. Vocabulary words. Axis is a number line on the coordinate plane. Quadrant, one of the four regions created by the x and y axis. And coordinates, a set of numbers that shows a location on the coordinate plane. So, let's take a look at these. Start with axis. The example down here has two axes. This is the y-axis, and this is the x-axis. Those are both number lines that we use to find spots on the graph. Quadrant. Quadrant are the four sections that are separated by the x and the y-axis. The upper right section is quadrant 1. The upper left section is quadrant 2. The lower left is quadrant 3. We use Roman numerals to mark them. And the bottom right is quadrant 4. It's Roman numeral 4. And lastly, coordinates. Coordinates are a set of numbers that show a location on the coordinate plane. So, for instance, if I was to look at a certain point on this graph, like this point right here, the coordinates that mark that point are 4, 2. Coordinates have two numbers, we call them an ordered pair, and they have parentheses around them. Alright. So now let's talk about how to plot points with negative numbers. Step number 1. The first number tells you how far across you go from the origin. Positive is to the right and negative is to the left. So origin, let's take another look at our graph, our coordinate plane. The origin is right there. It's right in the center. We call that the origin. Origin, the word origin means beginning. And that's where you begin anytime that you graph a point. Okay. So, first number tells you how far across you go from the origin. Positive is to the left, positive is to the right, and negative is to the left. The second number tells you how far up or down you go. Positive is up and negative is down. And we'll worry about this last one when we get to it. So I'm going to show you how to plot 1, 3. Look back up at the steps. The first number, the 1, tells you how far you go from the origin to the right. 1's a positive number, so I'm going to go to the right 1. The second number tells me how far up or down to go. The second number is a 3, so I'm going to go up 3. So the point is right here. When you are actually plotting points, don't draw the lines in like I just did. I did that just to show you how to do it. So let's get rid of those lines. That's the point. And you would label it with its coordinates. That's 1, 3. It's in the first quadrant. Now, if I want to plot -1, 3, I would start at the origin, and I would go left 1 and up 3. So that's right there. That point is -1, 3, which gets us to this last step, number 3. Notice the difference in the coordinates. The only difference is that in the first point, the x-coordinate was 1, and in the second point, the x-coordinate was -1. The sign changed, and if you change the sign of a coordinate, the point reflects, and it's supposed to say across. it reflects across an axis. So the point did reflect across an axis. It started here and it reflected across the y-axis. Reflect is when something goes to the other side of an axis exactly the same distance. So it's almost like you folded the whole graph on the y-axis, and that first point ended up over there. All right? So when we go to plot the last point, -1, -3, that's the same as this point, except the 3 changes. So that means it's going to reflect across an axis. Just the sign change. It's the same digits, just the signs are different. So -1, -3, you'd start at the origin, go to -1, then down 3, because the second number is negative. So that's a reflection across the x-axis. The point goes across the x-axis the same distance and lands at -1, 3, or -1, -3. Okay? One thing I haven't told you, that although I've kind of talked about it, these coordinates are always in a certain order. The numbers are always in a certain order, and the order is x, y. We call the first number the x coordinate because that's how far you go along the x-axis when you go to plot it. This first point, you go across 1, right there, and then up 3. The second one, you go back 1. Third one, you also go back 1. Those are the x coordinates. The second number is the y coordinate. That's the 3 and the 3 and the -3. Those points, those numbers tell you how far you go up or down on the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis is that number line. So you'll hear us talk about x coordinates and y coordinates, and those have to do with the x and y axis. So let's finish out your notes. Do your quick check problem, classroom example. You need to plot -2, 0. So on your notes, go ahead and sketch a coordinate plane with a y-axis and an x-axis. And rather than draw in all the lines, you can just make little hash marks along the lines. So if I was going to graph a point like 2, 3, I would start at the origin and go, forgot my parentheses, over 2 and up 3 to right there. So you plot -2, 0. Good luck.